August 16, 1944. 3:17 a.m. A storage corridor beneath Gare de l'Est, Paris. The concrete sweats in the summer heat, but down here it feels like a crypt. Dust floats in the beam of a single bare bulb. Somewhere above, a locomotive coughs awake, metal clanking over metal, the sound of an occupied city grinding through another night under German boots. The air tastes of coal, oil, and old water. Henri Delattre pauses in the gloom, hand resting on the wooden handle of his mop bucket, listening. You can almost feel his heartbeat in the silence. A freight car slams shut somewhere overhead. A guard barks in German, the words echoing through the iron bones of the station. Henri cannot see him, but after 4 years as the night janitor, he knows the pattern. The guard will check the freight manifest, smoke a cigarette, then move on toward track 7. 7 minutes. He has measured it with his pulse, night after night. He needs only 3. Henri looks not at the heavy padlocked door in front of him, but at the floor. A German engineer passed through here an hour ago, complaining that the idiotin in the rail office had changed the timetable again. Panzers, he said. Tank trains. Coming from the east, going west as fast as the rails can carry them. Henri had smiled then, a tired deferential curve of the lips that a man like that never looks at twice. A nobody's smile. A janitor's smile. He doesn't smile now. Instead, he bends, reaches down, and pulls at the frayed end of his right bootlace. The lace comes free with a soft hiss, the way a fuse sounds in the moment before it catches. He has thought about this, obsessed over it, really for months. Sabotage is not a single grand explosion, he's been told. It is friction, delay, 1,000 small cuts in the flesh of a machine that believes itself invulnerable. The British on the radio talk about blowing bridges and rail lines, but Paris is not the open countryside. It is stone, glass, flesh. One wrong blast here, and you kill more Parisians than Germans. So Henri has to do something that doesn't look like sabotage, something that looks like janitorial work. He crouches beside the door, that heavy steel plate with a German sign bolted to it. Betrieb nicht streng. Do not disturb operations. He knows what is behind that door. He learned it by cleaning quietly and watching carefully, the way a man watches the sea to understand the tide. Behind that door, 20 meters of corridor lead to the switching relay room that controls half the eastbound traffic in and out of Paris. The Germans think this place is safe. After all, who would suspect the broom closet? Henri runs his thumb along the bootlace's length. To any casual eye, it is nothing but an old piece of leather, sweat, stained, and cracked. But he has spent weeks worrying it, peeling away its core, and threading in something else. A thin strand of copper wire, scavenged from a broken telephone line 2 months ago, the insulation replaced with wax scraped from candles at St. Laurent Church. It is not a bomb. Not exactly. It is a tripwire, a snare, and if it works the way he has imagined, it will be a trigger. And if it doesn't work, then the Germans will find a man in coveralls on his knees in the dark, tying his shoe. He slides the key, their key, stolen and copied in a single breathless night by a locksmith in Belleville, into the lock. The metal clicks. The sound is deafening in the quiet. He freezes, counting silently. 1, 2, 3. No shout, no boots. He turns the key the rest of the way, opens the door just enough to let a blade of light cut across the corridor beyond. The relay room at the far end hums softly. A nest of electromechanical switches that the Germans rely on more than they realize. Modern war depends on timetables. Where the train is now, where it will be in 2 hours, when the tanks will arrive at the front. If you steal 4 minutes from a timetable, nothing changes. If you steal 40, Panzer column meets an Allied fighter-bomber squadron instead of an empty sky. Henri slips inside and lets the door fall half-closed behind him, leaving only a narrow crescent open. The trick is to make everything look accidental. The Germans expect sabotage to arrive with dynamite, not with dust. 3 days ago, in a cafe that pretends to be closed after dark, a man from London at least, that is how they describe him, had unrolled a rough map on a sticky table. He'd spoken quietly, in precise, clipped French, about what was coming. The Allies were pushing hard after the breakout from Normandy. German panzer divisions, including elements of 2 SS Panzer Division, Das Reich, and other armored units, had already been delayed in the countryside by blown tracks, down bridges, and French resistance ambushes. But now Berlin wanted every remaining tank east of Paris pushed west, through the city's rails and roads, toward the crumbling front. "Every hour we steal from their movement," the man had said, "is an hour fewer that their tanks spend firing at the Americans and the British." Henri had stared at the map, at the thick pencil-black lines that represented tracks and roads, at the small circles where resistance groups had already cut rails or destroyed locomotives. He'd traced a finger toward Paris, toward Gare de l'Est, and realized something chilling. No one had marked his station. "Why not here?" he'd asked. The man from London had studied him, weighing, measuring. "Because here," he'd said, "if things go wrong, the Germans will not simply shoot 10 men in the woods. They will shoot 10 hostages for every German officer they suspect was delayed. They will burn city blocks. Paris must rise, but it must not burn." So Henri had gone back to work, back to his mop and his key, ring, his rag, and his quiet. And he had planned something that might not look like an act of war. Now, in the dim corridor, he kneels beside the relay room door. Above him, the ceiling vibrates as a locomotive grinds past, its weight sending a rain of fine dust drifting down. He coughs once, muffles the sound with his sleeve. The leather bootlace lies coiled between his fingers. He has only a rough understanding of electricity, enough to not kill himself, he hopes. What he does know is this: the Germans have installed an emergency cutoff switch just inside the relay room door. A safety device meant for fires or accidents. Pull the handle, and the power to the switching array cuts out. All signals drop to danger. Every train approaching an affected block of track must stop or crash. The Germans don't want crashes in Paris. Crashes are messy. So the system is designed to be fail-safe, to turn red when uncertain. Henri's plan is simple, almost stupid in its audacity. Turn certainty into chaos, not with explosives, but with a piece of string. He measures the distance between the emergency handle and the door frame with his eyes. Then he loops one end of the altered bootlace around the base of the handle, tying a tight knot that looks, at a glance, like any clumsy workman's repair. The other end he threads through the crack of the door and along the bottom of the corridor wall, where shadows pool thickest near the floor. You can almost feel the roughness of the concrete under his fingertips as he feeds the lace along the skirting, tucking it behind a rusted pipe, pinning it with an old nail. Every movement is both rehearsed and improvised, like a jazz musician playing a tune no one else can hear. At the far end of the corridor, near the bend that leads back to the main service passage, he ties the last section of the lace to a heavy, innocent object, a battered wooden bucket, its metal handle squeaking softly. Inside the bucket, hidden beneath dirty rags, lies the other part of his ID, a small block of wood carved just so, and a wedge of metal scavenged from an unused signal lever. If someone moving at speed in the dark, say, a German officer or engineer responding to an alarm hits that bucket and sends it flying, the bootlace will jerk the emergency handle inside the relay room sharply downwards. The power will cut off. Signals will drop. Everything stops. And it will look, to any investigating eye, like a stupid accident. A bucket knocked over. A safety lever tripped. A janitor's mess. Henri sits back on his heels, sweat prickling at his neck. This single trap will not stop 3 panzer divisions by itself. But it doesn't have to. It only has to be the first note in a discordant symphony. There are others. 2 teenage messengers in leather jackets who will misplace critical dispatches the moment the signals malfunction. A switchman who will misread an order and hold an entire line at caution. A sympathetic gendarme who will whisper to a friend in the metro that something is wrong. At Gare de l'Est, sending whispers rippling outward until no one in the underground trusts that the trains are safe. The French resistance has already learned that cutting a single key line or blocking a critical junction can delay German reinforcements by hours or even days, especially when done in concert across regions. Tonight, Henri is not blowing up rails. He is inserting sand into the gears of a timetable that was built for perfection. He rises, muscles creaking, and wipes his hands on his coveralls. From his pocket, he pulls another bootlace, this one untouched. He threads it through his right boot, fingers moving automatically. This is the last piece of camouflage. No one must look at his feet and wonder. When he steps back into the main passage, the station seems louder. A whistle shrieks overhead. Somewhere, a freight wagon buffers another with a metallic slam that echoes through stone. German voices drift down the stairwell. One curse. Another laughs, the sound too relaxed for a front that is collapsing. They still think they are the masters of Paris. Henri pushes his mop bucket, his real one now, down the corridor, the wet rag smell following him like a ghost. He reaches the foot of the service stairs, just as the guard from Track 5 appears at the top, silhouetted in the doorway, cigarette ember glowing like a tiny red eye. The guard squints down. Do it below? Finished? You down there? Finished? Henri lifts a hand in a vaguely respectful half-salute. Beantet, Herr Unteroffizier, he says in his accented German. Almost. The guard mutters something and disappears. Henri waits until the footsteps recede, until the station swallows the sound. He leans against the cool wall, closes his eyes for a heartbeat. It's such a small thing, he thinks. A bootlace, a bucket, a door left just ajar. But somewhere to the west, American and Free French armored units are racing toward Paris. And somewhere to the east, in rail yards full of idling engines and tank-carrying flatbeds, German officers are tracing lines on their own maps, counting on schedules to save them. Schedules that do not yet know they have been booby-trapped by a janitor. Henri opens his eyes and starts up the stairs, because he knows something the Germans don't. The man from London had said it plainly, his voice low and certain, eyes fixed on the map like he could see the future. Paris will rise, he had said, but only if we can keep the Panzers from reaching her in time. Henri had swallowed then, felt the weight of the city settle on his shoulders. Now, as he steps onto the dim platform, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, he feels that weight transform into something else. Not fear, not exactly. Responsibility. Behind him, in the bowels of Gare de l'Est, a piece of leather and wire lies in wait in the dark, ready to turn one panicked step into a catastrophe of timing for the German war machine. All it needs is the right moment, and the right man to trip over it. By 4:02 a.m., the heart of Gare de l'Est is beating faster. The big wall clock in the main concourse clicks over another minute, its hands twitching like the pulse of the station. The platforms glisten with a film of coal dust and last night's rain, turning every lamp reflection into a smear of dirty light. German sentries stomp their boots, stamping out the chill that creeps up from the tracks. Somewhere, a woman in a thin coat stands near a pillar, eyes fixed on nothing, clutching a parcel a little too tightly. Up in the glass-walled signal cabin that overlooks the eastern approach lines, Ober-Inspector Karl Hoffmann adjusts his spectacles and glares at the tangle of tracks below. To him, this station is not stone and steel. It is a living diagram. Each line, each branching junction, is a nerve. Each colored lamp along the track is a neuron firing or failing. The big track diagram in front of him studded with tiny bulbs that glow red, green, and amber might as well be a brain, and he is the man tasked with ensuring it never has a seizure. He is tired. He has been tired since 1940, when the first gray uniforms poured into Paris. But tonight he is something worse. Unresolved. The orders came down in a flurry, like snow, sometime after midnight. Priority movements. Special convoys. 3 armored Kampfgruppen, elements from different panzer divisions, being pulled off battered sectors of the front and shunted through the arteries east of Paris. They are to be refueled, rearmed, and pushed west toward what remains of the German line in Normandy. They have been allocated specific train paths through Gare de l'Est's jurisdiction, down to the minute, down to the kilometer. Someone in a clean staff office far from the front has drawn those lines with a ruler and a fountain pen. Those men expect the rails to obey. Hoffman taps the butt of his pencil against the margin of the timetable, where 3 thick red lines have been inked in by a junior officer. Each line is marked with a code and a time window. KG-Hagen, KG-Scharf. 3 armored fists, each with its own assigned trains. Each supposed to glide east to west with minimal delay, if everything runs on time. Hoffman looks up as a young French assistant Marcel, or Marcus, or something steps timidly into the cabin with a stack of fresh signal sheets. The boy's uniform is ill-fitting, the red SNCF patch slightly crooked. His dark hair is slicked back with too much oil, trying to mimic German neatness, but not quite managing it. Les nouvelles feuilles, Herr Oberinspector, the boy says, placing the stack on the edge of the desk. Hoffman grunts. He doesn't bother with French anymore. Legsi dahin. The boy nods, retreats, eyes flicking once too quickly to the big relay room indicator panel mounted on the wall. Almost nobody ever looks at that board. It only registers when one of the station's control blocks goes dark. Now, every bulb on it glows steady and reassuring. For the moment. Below, on track 4, a local commuter train wheezes into the station, brakes squealing, its carriages full of early shift workers and those Parisians who have learned that being out before curfew lifts is just a different kind of risk. The locomotive's plume spreads under the canopy like a low, dirty cloud. You can almost feel the engines shudder through the soles of your feet. Hoffman marks off the train's arrival time without really seeing it. His mind is already hours ahead, trying to visualize the armored trains that will soon thunder along these same rails. Flatcars bearing Panthers and Stooges, chained down like steel beasts. Tank crews huddled in open wagons, their faces gray under coal, soot, and fatigue. Ammunition wagons that could turn a yard into a volcano if they ever took a direct hit. He doesn't like armored convoys. They are magnets for Allied reconnaissance, for sabotage, for fate. He tells himself that the French are cowed, that their so-called resistance is a nuisance, not a threat. Yet he has heard the rumors, even through the thick glass of his office. Lines cut in the countryside, relay boxes blown up, locomotives derailed in the middle of nowhere and left to burn. He has seen the railway police reports stamped with ugly words: sabotage, terrorism. Somewhere beneath his feet, in the concrete veins of the station, another man has seen the same diagrams and chosen a different language for them. Henri Delattre counts his steps as he walks back toward the maintenance depot. He doesn't look like a man who has just set a trap for an empire. He looks like what his uniform says he is: a middle-aged janitor with sore knees and a bad back, pushing a mop bucket that sloshes when he takes a corner too sharply. In his pocket, his fingers worry the edge of a folded paper scrap. On it, in tiny letters, a list, not of what he must do next, but of who is doing what tonight. Yvette in the telegraph office, ready to lose certain messages if and when delays begin. Baptiste in the shunting yard, prepared to misalign a single set of points for maintenance, forcing a critical incoming train to wait. The two leather-jacketed kids from Belleville, whose real names he doesn't know one called Reynard, the other Mustic, are already perched somewhere near the eastern outskirts, bicycles and nails in hand, to help a convoy's trucks cough to a halt on cobblestones if they are rooted onto roads. None of them will ever see the whole design. They will only feel their own small part of it. That is how the network survives, compartmentalized like the switching circuits in the relay room. One fails, others reroute. Henri rolls the mop bucket into the depot and lets the door swing shut behind him. The smell here is of oil and rags, metal filings and stale cigarettes. A thin man in a grease-stained coverall looks up from a workbench, wipes his hands on a cloth, and grunts greeting. "Alors?" he asks. "You did it like that?" Henri glances once at the high open windows, where a sliver of platform is visible. German boots passing now and then. He keeps his voice low. "C'est en place." The mechanic exhales slowly, as if he has been holding his breath for an hour. "Merde, you are four." "Be still," says Henri. "Maybe." He doesn't stay. They have agreed. No lingering, no whispered strategy sessions within earshot of German ears. Every word is a potential tripwire too. He moves instead to his rack of tools, picks up a coil of rope, a wrench. He must look busy, ordinary. The most dangerous thing tonight would be to appear to have nothing to do. Above them, the station's PA system crackles to life. Souk from Nancy, entry onto Gliese 5. The voice is German, but the echoes belong to Paris, bouncing off stone, mingling with the murmur of French, the occasional barked laugh, the distant clatter of cups from a clandestine coffee vendor. Even now, even like this, the city refuses to sound conquered. Down in the corridor behind the relay room door, the bootlace lies where Henri left it, a thin, unremarkable line along the base of the wall. A draft stirs it slightly when someone opens a distant stairwell door. It sways, then settles again. The station's nervous system hums. Time passes. At 4:27, Hoffman's phone rings. He snatches it up. "Ja?" The voice on the other end is sharp, official. "We have received confirmation from headquarters. The first armored transport will be entering your sector at 6:10. You will ensure clear passage through blocks 12 to 19. No unscheduled traffic is to interfere." Hoffman's jaw tightens. "That is impossible. You're already handling. Make it possible." This is a Führer order. The line goes dead. Hoffman replaces the receiver with just a bit too much force. The French assistant near the back of the cabin flinches slightly, then pretends not to have heard. The inspector turns back to the diagram and starts rearranging lines in his head. He can delay local services, hold freight in sidings. He can even stack civilian trains nose to tail on slow sections and leave them fuming under red signals. But the armored convoys must glide through as if the entire station exists for them. He scribbles a new sequence of instructions, aware that every adjustment he makes awakens a little beast of unintended consequences. You can almost see those consequences gathering like storm clouds over the tiny bulbs on the wall. At 5:03, in a dingy apartment in the 10th arrondissement, 3 people hunch around a radio that should not exist. The set is small, its case scuffed and cracked, its innards repaired too many times with scavenged parts. The aerial wire trails up and out of the open window, hidden behind draining bedsheets. On the table beside it, a half-emptied bottle of cheap wine and a scattering of cigarette stubs. Louise, the woman everyone calls Matilda, when they remember to use code names, leans closer as a burst of static gives way to a familiar, precise English voice. To all networks in the Île-de-France region, the situation at the front is fluid. German armored units are being withdrawn for redeployment. You are authorized to delay, divert, and disrupt all enemy movements by any means that limit civilian casualties. The voice fades, replaced by a sequence of group codes that will later be decoded into more specific instructions. The message confirms what the resistance leadership in Paris has felt in their bones for days. The Germans are repositioning rapidly. That means weaknesses. That means gaps. Louise makes a note, scratching her pencil rapidly. She already knows, from her last meeting with contacts in the railway yards, that something is planned at Gare de l'Est. She doesn't know what. She doesn't need to. She only needs to ensure that when the first reports of technical difficulties reach her, she can amplify them, spread them to other cells, other stations, other junctions. One jammed signal box is a nuisance. 10, stretching across a region at the same time, is paralysis. She looks up at the two young couriers standing by the door, their satchels at the ready. When the station calls, she says, "You go. No questions, no heroics. You just pass the word. Nothing moves on time today, understand?" They nod, eyes wide. Back at Gare de l'Est, the sky beyond the glass roof is beginning to pale. The lamps seem less bright now, more brittle, as the first hint of dawn drips into the station's arches. A train whistles long and low, the sound mournful in the gray light. Henri stands near a stack of crates on platform 3, rag in hand, pretending to polish a brass rail. From this vantage point, he can see two critical things at once: the main concourse, where German military police stroll in twos, and the entrance to the service stairwell that leads down toward his bootlace. He is not waiting for anything as dramatic as an explosion. He is waiting for the almost invisible pivot point, a raised voice, a sudden call for a technician, a run of boots in the wrong place. You can almost feel the tension stretching across the space, a wire strung between floor and ceiling. The first omen comes at 5:41. A freight locomotive scheduled to pass through the station without stopping slams unexpectedly to a halt just beyond the eastern signals, its brakes squealing, its whistle shrieking annoyance. From the signal cabin, Hoffman barks into his microphone. Why has that train stopped? The block is clear. Down on the tracks, the driver leans out of his window, shouting up. His words are mostly lost to the distance, but a few float up. Phalanzage, signal, Rat gebilben, false indication. Signal stayed red. Hoffman scowls. The track circuit shows green. The panel insists the line is safe and open. Yet the driver is staring at a red light that refuses to change. He swears under his breath. Fault relay. It happens. Normally, it would be an inconvenience, a technical problem to be solved by a maintenance crew with a toolbox and a few hours to spare. Today, with armored convoys due to enter his sector in less than 30 minutes, it feels like a personal insult. He hits a buzzer. Hit me the relay room. Nothing. He buzzes again, harder. Relay room, respond? The French assistant hesitates. Herr Oberinspector, perhaps the line. Silence. Hoffman slams the intercom button with his palm. Downstairs, in that humming corridor where Henri's bootlace is stretched and waiting, the call light above the relay room door blinks steadily. No one is inside to answer it. Henri sees the first German technician break into a trot toward the service door. The man carries a toolkit and wears the expression of someone who has been woken too early for the wrong problem. His boots ring on the stone. Another man follows, an NCO from the railway police, hand resting lightly on the butt of his pistol. They disappear down the stairwell. Henri's heartbeat quickens, but his body does not move. He polishes the brass rail, back and forth, as if he has never done anything else with his hands. You can almost taste the metallic tongue in his mouth as adrenaline rises. In the relay corridor, the two men turn the corner, boots clicking in the confined space. Verdammt, the technician mutters. Always when the timetable is heavy. The railway police NCO grunts. Just fix it. There are important trains coming. They reach the closed relay room door. The call light glows above it. The technician fishes for his key. Probably just a stuck contact. I told them last month this system needs a full... His foot hits the bucket. It happens fast and stupid, the way accidents do. The bucket, balanced just so at the edge of the corridor, skids on a smear of forgotten soap residue. It flips, water and dirty clothes exploding outward. The technician curses as his boot slides. His hand shoots out for balance, slamming against the wall. The bucket flies sideways, the handle yanking hard on the bootlace, hidden along the base of the wall. Inside the relay room, where no one is watching, the emergency cutoff handle jerks down with a violent clack. For a fraction of a second, nothing changes. Then the hum dies. The relay banks choke, break, and fall silent. On the panel in Hoffman's signal cabin, 3 bulbs flicker, then start dropping from green to amber to red in a fast, cascading sequence. The block indicators around the problem section go dark, then all default to danger. The track diagram, moments ago a forest of ordered colors, starts to look like a city suffering a blackout. On platforms and approach lines, signals that were about to change to green freeze mid-cycle, then fall back to red. The freight locomotive that had stopped at the outer signal lets out another frustrated whistle as the driver sees every light ahead of him die into stop. What in God's name? Hoffman almost chokes on the words. The assistant gasps. Disturbance in the relay round? Fault in the relay room? Hoffman slams his fist on the desk. Get them back online. Get them. The phone rings again, shrill, urgent. He knows, before he picks it up, who it will be. Some headquarters voice, demanding why his sector has just gone from smooth to seized at the exact moment when they are counting minutes for armored convoys. He lifts the receiver like a man grabbing at a rope. Gare de l'Est, signal control, he snaps. The voice on the other end doesn't bother with pleasantries. What is happening there? Our trains are being held at your eastern boundary. We have priority movements that must. We have a technical failure in the relay. The words taste like broken glass. All blocks are showing danger. Until power is restored, no movement is possible. Safety regulations. Override the regulations, the voice hisses. This is war. Hoffman stares at the dead patches on the track diagram. He pictures trains feeling their way through blind signals, trying to obey shouted orders instead of automated safeguards. He imagines 2 of them meeting nose to nose on the same line, 20 wagons deep, with fuel and shells stacked high. He may be wearing a uniform, but he is still a railway man. Some lines he will not cross. Negative, he says. Without a functioning relay, I cannot guarantee safe routes. If you wish to assume responsibility, the voice curses him in colorful, imaginative German, then slams down the line. Up on platform 3, Henri hears the first hints of anger ripple through the station. Engines rumble, then shudder down to idle. Whistles blow in irritated staccato. German officers in peaked caps cluster in little knots, gesturing with their hands as if they can move trains with fingers alone. To a casual passenger, it is just a delay. To someone who has lived the last 4 years here, the pattern is stark. The smooth rhythm of the occupation has stuttered. You can almost feel the mood change, like the air pressure dropping before a storm. Henri wipes his rag in slow circles, forcing himself not to smile. This is only the first snag in the German timetable. A small one, perhaps. But somewhere east of Paris, an armored train-coated KG-Hagen is already running 5 minutes late because of another minor incident. A temporary speed restriction enforced by a track crew that took just a little too long to clear. Somewhere else, a bridge guard insisted on rechecking papers, adding 3 more minutes. Tiny things, each insignificant on its own. Together, they will mean that when this relay room accident locks the station like a clenched fist, 3 separate Panzer formations will find their carefully printed schedules turning into lies. Henri doesn't know the names of those units, or the exact timing of their march westward. He only knows this: the Allied columns pushing toward Paris are also racing against time, and he has just stolen some of that time from the enemy and tossed it into the Seine. In the shadow of the glass roof, as dawn presses harder against the horizon, the station shudders and grinds to a halt. The bootlace in the dark has done its work. But this is only the beginning of the snare. Henri has always known that the most dangerous part of any sabotage is not the act itself. It is what comes after, when the enemy realizes something is wrong, but not yet why. The jam in the station spreads like a slow, invisible spill. Trains sit under the rising light, metal hulks exhaling steam. Couplings creak as weight shifts, then stills. Passengers lean out of windows, craning their necks for answers that do not come. Somewhere on platform 6, a child begins to cry, his thin wail joining the station's uneasy chorus. In the signal cabin, the air has grown thick. Hoffman paces between the diagram board and the desk, the soles of his shoes whispering against the worn floor. The relay room indicators remain stubbornly dark. Strung, the panel announces in blocky letters: failure. He has sent 2 more men down to assist the first technician and the railway police NC. No response so far. The intercom line buzzes with a dead, irritating static. Behind him, the French assistant hovers near the logbook, pencil hovering uselessly above the page. Do you want me to mark the delays? Herr Oberinspector? Hoffman almost laughs. Mark the delays. As if ink could capture what is happening out there, where armored convoys and fuel trains and troop transports grind against one another on the rails, held at signals that refuse to budge from red. Leave it, he snaps. Just monitor the outer blocks. If any track circuit reports occupied where it shouldn't be, I want to know immediately. The boy nods, Adam's apple bobbing. He turns toward the board, but his eyes flick for a moment toward the city beyond the glass wall, where the sky is softening from black to gray. He is thinking, perhaps, not of circuits and blocks, but of what it means for Paris when the German machine hiccups like this. Down in the relay corridor, the water from the spilled bucket has found every minor imperfection in the floor. It seeps into hairline cracks, pools in shallow dips, runs along pipes. The technician's curses echo off the walls as he kneels, pant legs damp, tools splayed out around him. Verdanter missed. He had already found the emergency handle tripped inside the relay room, already reset it with a hard yank. But when he restored the power, the relay array did not sing back to life as it should. Half the circuits refused to close fully. Some clicked, wavered, and dropped back to open, as if unsure what state they wanted to be in. Water and electricity mate for treacherous company. The railway police NCO stands back, trying to look like he understands the tangle of wires and terminal blocks. He keeps his hand away from anything that hums. He prefers simple things: a gun, a truncheon, clear orders. Can you fix it? He demands. The technician doesn't look up. If you want it fixed correctly, I need time. If you want it fixed quickly, I can try to bypass some. Quickly, the NCO snaps. Important trains are waiting. The technician grimaces. Quickly, then. That means shortcuts, temporary jumpers, maybe bypassing safety circuits that he would rather leave alone. But the pressure in the NCO's voice is the pressure of the whole apparatus above them. The Wehrmacht's timetable, the staff officers screaming into telephones, the cold, indifferent logic of war. He reaches into the relay bank and begins moving wires. A floor above their heads, on platform 3, the tension has settled onto people like a weight. Henri feels it in the way shoulders hunch closer, in the way conversations drop into hissing whispers as German patrols pass. He keeps his own movements slow, deliberate, wiping a sign here, adjusting a bench there, giving the impression of useless routine labor. What he wants to do is run, not away, across. He wants to slip into the telegraph office, to see Yvette's face when the first official messages about unexpected systemic failure begin to rattle in. He wants to glance at the clock in the station master's office and do the math. How many minutes are stolen now? How many more if the technicians down there do what he hopes they will do, make it worse before they make it better? But he cannot move towards the center of things. That would draw eyes. So he stays on the edge and watches those who cannot. Near the arrivals board, a German captain stands stiffly, jaw clenched, talking into a field telephone. Behind him, 2 enlisted men hover, shifting their weight, eyes on the ground. "No, Herr Major, the line is not clear," the captain says, voice strangled. "The central relay has failed. Yes, a technical. Yes, I understand the priority." Silence, then a sharp "Jawohl." He slams the handset down so hard the hook rattles. One of the enlisted men clears his throat. "Herr Hauptmann, the men on train 607 are asking." "They can rot in their wagons for all I care," the captain snaps. "Until the signals move, nothing moves. Nothing moves." Those words are drifting across Paris even now. In the telegraph office, Yvette sits at her station, headphones pressed to her ears. Lines of code and numbers flow past, the machine chattering like an anxious insect. She has been listening for a particular type of message, a cadence she knows by heart. Finally, it comes. From Gare de l'Est to regional control. Unexpected relay failure. All blocks holding at danger. Priority movements delayed. Request technical advice. She reads it twice, letting every word burn into her mind. Unexpected. Failure. Priority movements. Her fingers tremble slightly as she copies the message to a duplicate pad. One copy will be filed officially as required. The other, the duplicate, is what matters. That copy she will deliver later, tucked inside a folded newspaper, to a man who will never give his name. She adds 5 words in tiny, almost invisible letters at the bottom of the unofficial copy. Delays ongoing. Duration unknown yet. She is not lying. She doesn't know how long this will last. But those words, duration unknown, might as well be a green light to every saboteur within reach of a track or switch. If the great machine is already coughing, then any further sand they can throw into its gears will grind louder. By 6:05, the first armored convoy scheduled to enter the sector is being held at an outer signal east of Paris. The heavy train sits on a slight gradient, the weight of tanks and wagons tugging at its couplings. On one flat car, a Panther tank looms, its barrel pointing skyward, crewmen sitting on the hull with their legs dangling over the side. They smoke in silence, eyes hollow, helmets pushed back on sweat-slick hair. Their commander, a lieutenant in a field gray tunic streaked with road dust, paces along the ballast beside the train. He glances repeatedly toward the red signal ahead, then at his watch. "Verdammt," he mutters. He has orders in his pocket with words like "Sofort" and "Unverzüglich" underlined boldly, immediately, without delay. He looks up at the sky. There is a thin, pale scene in the east where the sun will soon break. That light is the Allies' ally. Fighter-bombers prowl under skies like this, searching for exactly the kind of target he is standing beside. A fat, immobile snake of steel and fuel. He walks faster, boots crunching on gravel. "Driver!" he shouts up at the locomotive. "Can we not pass that signal under manual authority?" The driver leans out, asks Cap. "Not without orders from the control center, Herr Leutnant. If the block beyond is occupied." The lieutenant cuts him off. He knows the logic. He has seen what happens when trains collide. War has taught even eager officers to respect such mathematics. He swears again and stomps back toward his wagon. At his feet, between the sleepers, someone has shoved a small scrap of paper. He doesn't see it. A minute later, when the train shudders slightly as the driver lets off pressure The scrap flutters loose, blows across the rails, and comes to rest near a drainage grate. If he'd picked it up, he would have seen a handwritten message in French. Delays at Gare de l'Est, technical failure. Spread confusion. No trains move on time today. By 6:11, messages like that are being whispered or passed hand to hand at other stations, in shunting yards, under bridges. Each one is a quiet invitation. You can almost feel the network of small decisions lighting up across the region here. A worker decides to arrive late to his signal box. There, a welder forgets to finish a repair before a scheduled departure. Somewhere else, a farm truck breaks down, accidentally, on a crucial level crossing. From the German perspective, it looks like coincidence. Bad luck. A day when everything that could go wrong does. From the inside of the resistance, it feels like a rhythm. The Bootlace's tug is still traveling. Back in the relay corridor, the technician wipes sweat from his forehead, leaving a streak of grime. He has managed to restore partial function to the array, but it is a fragile, temperamental thing now. Some blocks respond correctly. Others flicker, then lag like a heartbeat with arrhythmia. I've bypassed the damaged section, he tells the NCO. We can bring some lines back up, but we must be careful. A misread signal. The NCO cuts him off. We don't have the luxury of careful. Turn on what you can. The rest we will manage with orders and patrols. The technician hesitates only a moment longer, then throws the main breaker. The humming returns, weaker than before but present. On the panel upstairs, some bulbs blink back to life. Greens appear where there were only reds. Lines that were dead now glow faintly. In the signal cabin, Hoffman exhales like a man surfacing from deep water. Finally, he mutters, "Tell the outer posts we are restoring limited function. Priority trains first. All others remain held." The assistant nods, hands shaking as he reaches for the microphone. But something is wrong. Hoffman feels it like a draft on the back of his neck. The pattern on the diagram is not the one he expects. Yes, some blocks have returned to service, but in odd combinations. A line that should clear from east to west is now showing a spurious occupancy in the middle. Another shows clear when he knows, from earlier logs, that a freight should still be sitting in it. He frowns. "Check the axle counters," he orders. The assistant stammers. They are not responding correctly, Herr Oberinspector." For a moment, a crazy thought flashes through Hoffman's mind, that someone has done this on purpose, that an invisible hand has reached into his circuits and twisted them. Then he pushes it aside. Sabotage looks like explosives, not like misbehaving relays. This is just bad luck and poor maintenance, he tells himself. A system stretched beyond what it was built to carry. He starts issuing manual instructions anyway. Hold train 407 in the siding at Block 8. Route the first armored convoy. Through Blocks 12 to 15 only when we have visual confirmation that the line is clear. Dispatch extra men to observe the track physically. No movement without eyes on. This is the only compromise he can live with. Accept some risk, but demand human verification. That, however, introduces a new delay. Men have to be sent out on foot or bicycle to look at sections of track that should be confirmed by light bulbs alone. Minutes leak away like water in the cracks of the floor. On platform 3, Henri senses, rather than knows, that the relay room has half recovered. Signals at the ends of platforms shift, some flickering from red to amber. Engines stir, creaking forward a meter, then stopping again as new orders filter through the tangle. The Germans are trying to claw back control. He glances at the station clock. He doesn't know the exact schedule of the Panzer convoys, but he knows the shape of German logistics. Tanks are not sent to linger. Every minute they are not rolling toward the front is a minute someone in the headquarters will call a failure. Henry's part, he tells himself, is done. But is it? You could almost hear his mind arguing with itself. Every instinct screams at him to fade back into anonymity now, to become once more the ghost with a mop, to let others carry the next stage of the burden, and yet he notices something small, almost invisible, a German Feldgendarmerie patrol, walking not its usual pattern. Instead of moving along the outer edge of the concourse, they are cutting diagonally toward the service stairwell he used earlier. One of them has a radio. The other has a face like carved stone. They have finally decided that a simple technical fault is not enough of an answer. Henri's mouth goes dry. If they go down there and find the bucket, the bootlace, the suspicious angle of the emergency handle, will they see an accident or smell intention? He weighs his options in a heartbeat. He can do nothing and hope, or he can do something very small and very dangerous that might nudge their conclusions in the direction he needs. He drops his polishing rag as if by clumsiness and lets it flutter to the ground. "Ah, vieux idiot," he mutters loudly in French, bending to pick it up. As he does, he allows the momentum of his motion to carry him slightly off balance, bumping clumsily into a passing German supply clerk carrying a crate of paperwork. The crate spills. Sheets of orders, forms, and stamped documents cascade onto the stone floor. The clerk shouts, angry and flustered, "Idiot! Look where you are!" Henri babbles apologies, stooping to gather pages, stacking them in an uneven pile. The clerk curses and kneels too, scrambling after a particularly important-looking folder that has slid under the feet of a Feldgendarmerie man. For a few crucial seconds, the patrol's attention breaks. Their neat line falters. The man with the radio turns to see what the commotion is. The stone-faced one steps back to avoid stepping on the loose papers. Their path toward the service stairwell diverts, if only by a few meters. In that micro-adjustment, something else happens. A harried German lieutenant, coming from the opposite direction, clutching a set of fresh orders, collides shoulder first with the stone-faced man. "Verdammt," the lieutenant snaps. The Feldgendarme stiffens. "Watch where you're going, you." Voices sharpen. Tempers flare. For a moment, the service stairwell is forgotten, as rank and ego clash in the middle of the concourse. Henri's heart hammers so hard, he feels it in his teeth. He stacks the last of the papers into the crate, thrusts it toward the supply clerk with a mumbled, "Pardon, pardon." The clerk snatches it without thanks, still muttering. He stomps away. The patrol, now entangled in an argument about deference and orders, veers off toward the military police office rather than the stairwell. Henri exhales slowly, forcing his face to remain slack, dull. You can almost feel the narrowness of the escape, like a door nearly closing on his fingers. He cannot know for certain that this tiny diversion has saved the Bootlace trap from discovery. But he knows this. Every small confusion helps. The Germans are not a monolith. They are men, with pride and tempers and limited attention. The more of that attention is spent on trivial friction, the less is left to see the pattern beneath. By 6:40, the first armored convoy still has not entered Gare de l'Est. Hoffman has finally, reluctantly, authorized a cautious stop-start movement through the partially restored blocks, each section taken like a man feeling his way across a dark room. The armored train creeps forward, brakes ready, eyes peeled for unexpected obstacles. What should have been a smooth transit through the city has become a crawl. In those stolen minutes, the Allied timetable is flexing in the other direction. Columns of American and Free French vehicles are advancing west of Paris, having already cut several key road and rail routes that the Germans had once used freely. Every delay imposed on the incoming panzer units means fewer of those tanks will be in position when the outer defenses of the city begin to crack. Henri doesn't know these details. He only knows what he can see. German radios barking more frantically, staff officers stalking the platforms with tighter jaws, station loudspeakers announcing changes in terse, brittle German. The machine is still moving, but it is stumbling. And somewhere deep inside its stumbling gait, A janitor's bootlace has left a bruise. He pushes his mop bucket slowly toward the staff entrance at the far end of the platform, mind already turning toward the next hours. This cannot be all. The trap has sprung. The first chaos has been sown. Now, as morning breaks fully over Paris, the question becomes, will the city answer? Henri has learned, over 4 years of occupation, that revolutions in Paris never begin with a trumpet. They begin with a rumor. By mid-morning, the city has caught the scent of something wrong at the rails. It travels first through the places where people are forced to wait. Overfull trams stalled at junctions. Queues outside bakeries where deliveries have not arrived. Street corners where workers linger longer than usual. Cigarettes burning down between 2 fingers as they listen for the latest scrap of news. The trains are in trouble. You are gone. Encore the trees that organize. Not as usual. Well, it's different. The words change slightly from mouth to mouth, but the core remains. The Germans are having trouble. Not a minor snag, not a single derailment or a bombed track in some far-off field, but trouble at the heart of their system. At Gare de l'Est, the churn continues. On the Grand Concourse, the big clock hands jerk forward inexorably, indifferent to the human drama below. German officers stride through, boots striking sharp against stone, their voices clipped as they snap at subordinates. French workers move more slowly, eyes lowered, ears open. From the outside, it still looks like a station. From the inside of the resistance, it looks like a battlefield made of timetables and cables. Henri steps out of a side door into the narrow street behind the station, blinking at the sudden daylight. The air out here smells of exhaust, whetstone, and fried onions from a nearby cafe that is not officially open. He rolls his shoulders, feeling the stiffness set in. Adrenaline has ebbed, leaving a heavy fatigue in its wake. He wants coffee. He wants to sleep. Mostly, he doesn't want to be noticed. But he is not going home. He skirts along the brick wall, past stacked crates and garbage bins, toward a small metal door half hidden between 2 larger loading entrances. To anyone else, it is just another side access. To those who know, it is a mouth. 3 taps, 1 pause, 2 taps. The door opens a crack. A pair of dark eyes study him and widen slightly in recognition. Entrée vite. Inside, the air is cooler. The room is barely more than a storage closet. Shelves lined with cleaning supplies. A stack of folded tarpaulins. A faint smell of turpentine. But at its center stands a crude table, and around it 3 people who do not belong to the cleaning staff. Louise Mathilde stands straight, arms folded, her hair tied back with a plain scarf. She has the look of a woman who has not slept enough and does not intend to anytime soon. Beside her, Baptiste from the shunting yard leans with his hip against a crate, grease still under his nails. The third is a slight, sharp-featured young man with a messenger's satchel slung across his chest. Henri has seen him once before, dropping off a parcel labeled spare parts that rattled like weapons. "You're late," Baptiste grunts. Henri snorts, closing the door behind him. "The botches are late. I have been working." Louise steps forward, eyes searching his face. "You did it?" He hesitates only a heartbeat, then nods. The relay room. An accident. At least, that's how it must look. Baptiste barks a short, humorless laugh. I heard the commotion from the yard. Signals going mad. Trains stopping where they shouldn't. It was like watching a drunk giant try to walk a straight line. The young courier's fingers twitch against his satchel. The message reached the network. Technical failure at Gare de l'Est. Priority trains delayed. It's spread already. Henri lets out a slow breath. That was the point. Not just the disruption itself, but the story of the disruption. Machines obey physics. Men obey stories. Do we know how long? Louise asks. Henri shakes his head. They are patching it. Some lines are moving again. But it's irregular. They must route armored trains by eye now. That takes time. Time they don't have, Baptiste says. Louise moves around the table, tapping a finger lightly on a rough pencil sketch of the region pinned there. It is a crude map, drawn from memory and stolen glimpses of official diagrams. Rail lines converging on Paris, junctions marked with X's, yards circled in faint blue. Listen, she says, this isn't just about one station. The Allies have broken through past Avranches. Their columns are swinging like a hammer toward the Seine. The Germans want those panzers out of the south and east to throw against the Americans and the British before they reach Paris in strength. She taps 3 points on the map lines heading eastward. If we slow those trains, if we tangle their movements enough, some of those tanks will still be on flatcars or stuck in sidings when the first Allied patrols reach the outskirts. They will not be dug in on the heights. They will not be blocking the bridges. They will be late. You could almost see the weight of that word settle over the cramped room. Late? It seems so small, so harmless in everyday life. A missed tram, a delayed appointment. But in war, lateness can be lethal. A company arriving 10 minutes after an enemy airstrike instead of 10 minutes before. A panzer regiment rolling into a defensive line after it has already collapsed instead of stiffening it in time. What do you need? Henri asks. He doesn't say, what more do you need from me? The answer, he suspects, will be everything. Louise looks at him closely, measuring. We need to turn your accident into a pattern. The Germans can explain away 1 failure, 2 perhaps, if they are far apart. But if, in the next day or 2, every attempt to move large formations toward Paris runs into unexpected difficulties, she lets the thought hang. Baptiste leans forward, stabs a finger at a junction northeast of the city. They've already rerouted 1 armored train through here this morning. I heard it on the yard radio. If we can force a stoppage there, nothing dramatic, just enough to make them divert again. The courier speaks up, voice quick. There's a level crossing on the alternate route. A village with a narrow main street. If trucks start backing up there because someone stalled, Henri's mind is already ticking ahead. Every suggestion is a thread. Alone, it frays and breaks. Woven together, it becomes a net. I am one man with a mop and a key ring, he says quietly. I can snare them once, maybe twice. But beyond this station, Louise smiles, thin and fierce. Beyond this station, others are waiting. Do you think you are the only janitor in France who hates them? The only signalman who can count the seconds between passing trains? The only mechanic who knows which bolt to loosen so that a critical engine coughs its last breath at the worst possible moment? She shakes her head. You lit a match in the dark, Henri. Now we carry that flame. You can almost feel the fragile, dangerous hope in that cramped space. It's not naive. They all know the cost. They've seen walls riddled with bullet holes, posters announcing executions, streets cordoned off for reprisals. They have all attended someone's funeral that had no body, only a name. The Germans will suspect something, Henri says. It is not fear that drives the question. It is simple accounting. Louise's gaze hardens. They already suspect something. They have suspected since the first rail line blew in the countryside. But they cannot be everywhere. They cannot point fingers at every small failure without paralyzing themselves. If every broken relay, every jammed brake, every misplaced order is treason, then half their French workforce has to be shot. She steps closer, lowers her voice. And if they start shooting everyone, what happens then? Henri knows the answer. He remembers 1940, the crushed spirits, the long lines of prisoners. He remembers 1942, when the first deportation trains rolled out. He remembers 1943, when whispers began to harden into networks. The more brutal the occupier, the more brittle. If they start shooting everyone, he says slowly, They lose the very hands that keep their war machine running. Exactly, Louise nods. So they will do what they always do. Crack down in places that seem obvious. Make an example here, send a train of prisoners there. But the trains will still need to move. They cannot afford to stop using the French rails, French workers, French stations. That dependence is our lever. Baptiste snorts. And you, Monview, have just given them a nasty jolt with that lever. Henri's mouth twists into something that might be a smile. It doesn't reach his eyes. Then we had better be ready for their hand to push back. They spend the next half hour sketching out a plan that is less a single operation than an attitude. At certain key times in the next 48 hours' times, guessed from patterns of movement, from scraps of overheard telephone calls, from the cadence of the German day railway workers sympathetic to the resistance, will be clumsy. A switch will be locked incorrectly, then rediscovered and corrected after a delay. A telegraph message will be misrouted, arriving too late to authorize a critical departure. A drawbridge will stick halfway, requiring engineers to inspect the mechanism while trains wait. No single act will scream sabotage. Each will be frustrating, infuriating, but plausible. But the cumulative effect, Louise hopes, will be to turn German schedules into fiction. Finally, she looks back at Henri. "And you?" she asks. "What will you do now?" Henri thinks of the station he has come to know like a body, its nerves and arteries, its beats and breaths. He thinks of the bootlace still hidden in that corridor, of the emergency handle, of the technician's curses. "I go back to work," he says simply. If the Germans see a janitor who suddenly has nowhere to be today, they might ask themselves why. Louise nods once. No heroic protest, no insistence that he rest. In this war, staying alive and unremarkable is sometimes the bravest thing a man can do. "Be careful," she says. "You too, Matilda." Henri steps back into the harsh daylight. The station looms ahead, its stone facade streaked with soot, its clock face implacable. He squares his shoulders and re-enters the mouth of the beast. Inside, the rhythm has shifted again. Trains inch forward, then halt. Platforms crowded and thin in waves as departures are announced, then cancelled. German military police move in pairs more often now, eyes scanning faces. Notices are hastily pinned to walls, informing travelers of technical difficulties due to enemy action. The last phrase is meant to save face. It is easier on pride to blame some amorphous enemy than faulty engineering. But that phrase does something else, unintended. Enemy action? To ears attuned to nuance, it confirms that the hours-long chaos was not just a fluke. Someone did this. In a bakery 3 streets away, a woman wraps a loaf of bread in paper and murmurs to her customer, "Tu as entendu? C'est la résistance. Paradil. Ils ont touché le coeur de la guerre." In a tram sputtering along Boulevard de Magenta, a conductor leans toward a colleague at a stoplight. Less botches and rages. Less trains blind ceases. They said that Paris would wake up, no? In the smoky upper room of a café near Place de la République, a group of student-aged men and women lean over a hand-drawn map of the city, excitement and fear warring in their eyes. If they're hitting the rails, it means they think the Allies are close, one says. Or desperate, another counters. Either way, a third murmurs, it means the time is coming. You can almost feel the city inhaling. It is not yet the great roar that will rise days later when barricades go up and tricolor flags appear on balconies. For now, it is quieter, like a theater audience leaning forward in the dark as the orchestra begins to tune. Back at Gare de l'Est, Henri resumes his circuits. He sees small signs that only someone like him would notice. A French porter slips a folded leaflet into the pocket of a traveler in a warm coat. Leaflet that will later unfurl into instructions on how to slow German truck convoys without drawing fire. A young woman in a plain dress lingers at the public telephone, dialing a number that rings twice and cuts, then dialing another, then another, each hang up, a prearranged signal bouncing across the city. A man in a railway police uniform, his face gray and tired, deliberately looks the other way as a known black marketeer hauls a crate across the platform. Inside that crate, beneath illicit coffee and soap, lies a radio transmitter destined for a resistance hideout. All of them are tiny gestures. All of them rely on the same assumption, that the great German machine can be tripped, nudged, delayed not just by bombs and guns, but by missteps and miscalculations. Henri feels strangely small and huge at the same time. Small because he is still only a janitor, cloth in hand, shoes scuffing the same worn stones. Huge because somewhere east of the city, a German armored battle group is looking at its watches, looking at the sky, and realizing that the day is not unfolding as the staff officers promised. He pauses near a window that overlooks a slice of the city beyond the station, where rooftops stretch toward the horizon. Somewhere out there, he knows, American tank crews are checking their fuel levels. French armored units under Leclerc are poring over maps. Allied pilots are glancing down at the patchwork of fields and roads, all of them unknowingly benefiting from the extra minutes his accident has bought them. He doesn't know their names. They will never know him. But in this moment, their fates are tied by something as ridiculous and fragile as a bootlace. You can almost hear the question hanging over Paris now, unspoken but heavy. If one man with a mop can bruise a Panzer division's schedule, what happens when a whole city decides to pull? Paris hums with a tension that no timetable can contain. By early afternoon, the station's chaos has metastasized into something the Germans can no longer dismiss as coincidence. In the signal cabin, Hoffman stares at his track diagram like a man watching his own veins clot. The patchwork of restored blocks flickers under his gaze greens, turning ambers to red, then back again in maddening cycles. Each change demands his attention, each irregularity a fresh insult to his authority. He has teletyped headquarters twice already, each message more terse than the last. First, relay partially restored, limited movements resuming. Then, an hour later, irregular circuit behavior persisting. Priority trains diverted to alternate routes. Request additional technicians. No reply yet. The lines are clogged with similar pleas from other stations, other signalmen fighting their own invisible battles against relays that refuse to obey. Below, on the concourse, the human tide ebbs and surges. Platforms empty, then fill again as cancellations ripple outward. A German colonel storms past Henri, face purple, bellowing at an aide who trails behind with a clipboard. "Get me the station master. I will have answers or heads." Henri keeps his head down, moving the mop in slow arcs. He has heard that tone before the fraying edge of control. It is the sound a man makes when he senses the world slipping from under his calculations. You could almost taste the salt of his sweat as he works closer to the service stairwell, ears straining for any hint that the Bootlace corridor has been found. Nothing yet. Out in the city, the whisperers have hardened into action. At a narrow level crossing 5 kilometers northeast, where the main road pinches between stone houses, a battered Citroën delivery van breaks down squarely across the tracks. Its driver, a wiry man named Paul, who runs a legitimate butcher shop by day, pops the hood and stares helplessly at the engine, tools scattered dramatically around his feet. He knows the timing by heart. A German truck convoy rerouted from the rail jam is due any minute. The lead truck appears around the bend, slows, then halts. Its driver leans on the horn. Paul waves apologetically, tinkers with a visible fuel line, then shouts something about needing a part from town. Behind the truck, more vehicles pile up, staff cars, fuel Bowsers, troop transports carrying weary Panzer grenadiers pulled from battered eastern sectors. The column stretches back 1/2 kilometer, a steel serpent choking on its own bulk. Paul works slowly, very slowly. By the time a full gendarmerie motorcycle patrol arrives to investigate, the delay has already chewed 20 precious minutes from the convoy's schedule. The patrol captain curses, orders the van towed, but by then the damage is done. Orders must be shouted backward along the line, units reshuffled, and alternate routes scouted through unfamiliar villages. That alternate route will run straight into another accident, a fallen tree that a local farmer discovered too late to clear before the new path was chosen. Further east, at a marshalling yard near Meaux, Baptiste and 2 others from the network execute their own small masterpiece. They do not blow the tracks. They don't need to. Instead, they misalign a set of points leading to a siding where empty flatcars wait to receive the next wave of tanks from KG-Vogel. A locomotive shunting armored vehicles into strike positions, the misaligned points at low speed, shearing off a switch rod with a screech of tortured metal. No one is hurt. No one is meant to be. But the damage takes hours to repair, and in the meantime, 3 flatcar loads of Panthers sit idle on the main line, blocking the path for fuel and ammunition trains. German yardmasters scream into telephones. Engineers scramble with cutting torches. The timetable, already bruised at Gare de l'Est, now bleeds. Back in Paris, Louise listens to the reports filtering into the cramped safe house behind the station. A bicycle courier bursts through the door, breathless, satchel flapping. The crossing at Pant in 20 minutes and counting. Trucks back to the canal. Another voice from the corner, where a radio operator hunches over a Morse key. Yard at Meaux, signaling major shunt failure. Armored trains held. She nods, marks the map with quick strokes. Each pinprick is a victory, small but compounding. The German High Command planned for these panzer groups to reinforce the Seine bridges by nightfall, to form a carapace of steel around Paris's eastern approaches. Instead, KG-Hagen is crawling through villages. Kilogram's Vogel is snarled in a yard. Scharf, the rearmost, has not even loaded half its tanks yet, thanks to a flooded engine house where sympathetic workers accidentally left valves open overnight. You can almost feel the invisible web tightening. Henri slips away during a lull, ducks into a staff lavatory, locks the door. For the first time since dawn, he allows himself a moment alone. He splashes water on his face, stares at his reflection in a cracked mirror. Gray stubble, deep lines around the eyes, coveralls stiff with dried sweat. He looks like every other man who has spent a lifetime scrubbing other people's messes. No one would guess that this face now anchors a chain of delays stretching 30 kilometers. He thinks of his wife Marie, waiting in their flat near Belleville. She knows nothing specific, only that tonight, like many nights, he works late. She leaves a plate covered with cloth on the table, prays to a God who seems distant these days. He thinks of his son, lost in 41 to a deportation list. The official story was typhus in a labor camp. Henri knows better. That rage, that hollow grief fuels him now. He dries his hands and steps back into the station's roar. By late afternoon, the first cracks appear in the German response. Feldgendarmerie detachments fan out from barracks, not toward the city center, but toward rail depots and signal cabins. They drag in workers for questioning random sweeps, faces chosen by whim or suspicion. A switchman from the northern lines vanishes into a staff car. A telegraph operator at Montparnasse is beaten in an alley for incorrect paperwork. The reprisals are meant to cow. They achieve the opposite. Each arrest becomes a story. Every story, a spark. In bars and markets, men who were neutral yesterday now spit when they say, "Bosh." Women who once averted their eyes now meet patrols with cold stares. Children chalk crude V for Victory signs on walls before dusk erases them. Paris remembers its history. It knows how occupations end. At Gare de l'Est, the armored trains finally begin to creep through ghostly processions under watchful eyes. Flatcars groan under the weight of tanks, their crews bundled against unseasonal chill, staring dully at passing platforms. Signals flicker green long enough for passage, then relapse into caution. Hoffman watches each one clear his blocks with something like relief, but no joy. He knows the cost: local services gutted, freight abandoned, civilian timetables in ruins. He knows, too, that irregular circuits mean accidents waiting to happen. A misrouted train, a collision in fog. By dusk, 2 of the 3 Kampfgruppen have limped through Paris's rail net. The third, KG-Scharf, remains east, its flatcars still stacked in sidings, delayed by cascading failures that no single man can trace back to a Bootlace. Henri works through the evening shift, bone-tired but alert. He overhears snatches of German conversation. "I verdammten in Franzosen. Sabotage everywhere. We must secure the bridges." He sees staff cars speeding toward the Seine, officers clutching maps marked with red lines, the same lines Louise showed him, now bent and broken. Night falls hard over the city. Searchlights stab upward from Eiffel Tower heights, not in triumph, but in warning. Allied bombers drone distantly, too far to strike, yet close enough to remind everyone of the hammer descending. In the safe house, Louise gathers her people. The map is a battlefield of pins and crossings out. "They got 2 through," she says. "1 still entangled. And the 2 that passed? They're hours late to their assembly points. The Allies will hit them strung out on roads, not massed on heights." Cheers, brief and fierce, ripple through the room. Henri doesn't join them. He slips out into the cooling air, walks the long way home through streets alive with murmur. He passes a cafe spilling laughter and song. A woman on a balcony shakes out a sheet, and for a heartbeat he swears he glimpses blue-white-red in the folds. Paris breathes deeper. 2 days later, when Leclerc's 2nd Armored Division rolls into the city's embrace, when barricades rise and tricolors bloom, when German garrisons surrender one by one, rather than fight street by street, historians will credit grand strategy, air superiority, the collapse of the Norman front. Few will speak of the Janitor. Nobody will mention the Bootlace. But in those critical hours when panzers needed rails and rails needed signals, and signals needed one small accident to remember their frailty, one man's impossible snare held the line. Paris was not saved by tanks or bombs alone. It was saved by friction, by delay, by a city that refused to have a timetable,